Again, thank you for joining us. And now I would like to begin to introduce our panelists, and I'll start with Leila Awadallah. So Leila Awadallah is a Palestinian American dancer, a choreographer, and film dabbler based between the ancestral Dakota lands of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Beirut, Lebanon. She is a founder of Body Watani, Dance Project and Practice. Leila's research, artistry, and cultural activism locates in the context of indigenous Palestine, as well as more broadly in Mediterranean and Southwest Asia and North Africa regions. She holds a Bachelor in Fine Arts and Dance from the University of Minnesota and is a Jerome Hill Fellow, Springboard Fellow, and Daring Dances Fellow, receiving support from NPN to produce her new piece, Tirania, developed in residencies at the Arab American National Museum in Michigan, the Camargo Foundation in France, and Amalgam Studio in Lebanon. Now, what we will be seeing is a short excerpt from 4 different projects. The first is called Three Wadallahs, an interdisciplinary dance film and music project created by 3 siblings, Leila, Noel, and Jamal Awadallah. The second shares the work of the Theater of the Women of the Camp, a project Leila is a creative partner with in Burj al-Barajni, Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. Third, the new and emerging Body Watani dance company showing a work in progress. And lastly, a solo by Leila called Tirania, which was created and premiered at the Arab American National Museum.
How do rivers flow across the land even when covered in ice? The waves of the lakes are hot and how do fish live in liquid grooves and when frozen? Fish don't know the difference when temperature changes and they remember what they know. The sky? The rainbows follow
All right. So we got over the technical problem, and we had the pleasure of seeing excerpts from performances by Leila. And now I'd like to turn to Sharon Monsoor. Sharon is an Arab, Southwest Asia, North Africa, American dance and interdisciplinary experimental artist, educator, curator, and community mover and shaker based in Kiaksa, Winona. I hope I pronounced the first one right, Minnesota, and in the Dakota lands. Her creative practice weaves movement, improvisation, visual installations, site responsive art, screen dance, food, and audience participation to offer immersive experiences rooted in body, imagination, and environment. She loves creating opportunities for people from all walks of life to connect with art and has shared her work nationally and internationally. Sharon directs the Cedar Tree Project, amplifying creative voices from the Arab Swana diaspora to increase understanding and empathy through artistic exchange. And she creates Shift performance salons to support local collaborative art sharings and conversations. You can find this at mansoordance.com and cedartreeproject.com. And if I may now turn to performance. Sorry, I need to describe the video. So it's called 1001 Arab Futures, as you can see there. So it's a convenient place I stop. It's an intimate outdoors site-specific solo dance performance and visual installation contemplating imaginative visions, past reckonings, embodied truth, and other future potentials from the Arab diaspora. Concept, performance, creative contributions by Mansoor, co-directed by Yara Bastouni from Lebanon, Andrea Shaker from Minneapolis, and Mete Lulu Von Kohl from New York City. The live performance premiered in June 2021 in Winona, Minnesota, and a film version premiered September 18th at the Cowles Center for Dance and the Performing Arts in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And after Sharon, we will be turning to Meryl Murman. Merrill Merman is a choreographer and filmmaker juxtaposing choreographic, cinematic, and live art practices to create works that emphasize interactivity and intimacy as radical acts. Her queer films and choreographies derived from experiments at the intersection of cinema and dance disrupt popular notions of spectacle, the body, virtuosity, and gender. Her practice reflects her Arab American diaspora lineage, emphasizing hybridity and the Levantine tradition of bridging cultures, while insisting on the imagination as a site of resistance and liberation. Her artworks have been presented in many parts of the world, and her dedication to human rights scholarship and somatic research has led her through support from the US Embassy to work on human rights-focused art projects, exploring sexual liberation, gender discrimination, and the effects of assimilation and migration on the body with female and LGBTQ refugees. Through a fellowship in 2018 in Kiev, Ukraine, and currently with a Fix in Art in Thessalonica, Greece, her essay, Deconstruction as Repair, co-authored with Josh Armstrong, will be published in Performance Research Journal 2021. And again, her website is merylmurman.me. And what we will see today is excerpts from the lipstick at the Contemporary Art Center in New Orleans. 6 individuals armed with only a bullet of red lipstick transgress borders, binaries, and the complex relation between identity and assimilation. Wow. uh, I was a bit kind of left breathless with all of these things. But now, last but not least, is Leyya Monatawi. And one thing I would like to note very quickly is that we're able to embed all the videos that you've seen in this presentation. Leia's, is on Vimeo. So basically, we're going to have to turn off my screen sharing, and then Danya, my colleague, will turn on hers. She has it queued up for that. So I apologize. There's going to be a little break between the two, not quite as seamless as these ones. So Leyya Monatawi is an artist working with sound, performance, and hybrid transmissions. Tawil is Syrian, Palestinian, American, engaged in the world as such. Her 25-year record of performances have been presented in the US, Europe, Russia, and the Arab world. She was a 2020 issue Project Room Suzanne Fiol Curatorial Fellow in New York City, 2018 Sari Fellow, I don't know if it's Finland or Florida, and currently resident artist with the Wising Arts Center, British Council, UK. She is the director of the TAC, Temescal Art Center in Oakland, California, and founder of Arab.amp, a platform supporting futurist art and ideas from the Swana diaspora, our region, and our allied BIPOC communities. You can find much of her work at danceelixirlive.org, and you can follow her at Arab.amp. I'm going to stop. The video we're going to see is an excerpt from Lime Rookie International's Future Folk, I think is what's called, which was commissioned and premiered at Abrams Art Center in 2019. Here you see Lime's Future Folk Dance. The footfalls and stomps are creating the sonic score in real time through microphones and effects. Lime uses Debke vocabulary to build this choreography. And for those of you not familiar with the term Debke, it is a Middle Eastern, primarily, dance form that is very much a folk dance. wanted to give this a little bit longer introduction than normal webinars because it's really important for us, since this is about dance, and obviously we're not live, that we don't have access to the brilliant performances that these wonderful panelists all have. So we thought we asked each of them to share with us a little bit. And as you can see, incredible talent and amazing moving movement, and I would say sound as well in that regard. So what I'd like to do now is to remind you, that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, right? Not in the chat, in the Q&A, and my colleague will curate those as we move forward. I'm going to start out with questions to all of our panelists, and we'll start alphabetically with Leila, and she can then turn on somebody else, or I can point somebody else. Just very broadly, just if you can speak, but also briefly, if you will, because there are four of us, about the process that brought you to dance, choreography, and performance. Just a little bit of your bio, so to speak, a little bit more kind of expanded. What got you involved in this? What is sort of some of the main turning points in your career? We'll start with Leila.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Leila. Yeah, this question, I think, when I was thinking about dance in my life, it has always felt like actually a portal into knowing the world. Like from when I was young, my first dance teacher, Reina, the way she would bring ideas and topics into the studio space. So I felt like in this small room, I was getting to know the whole world, and it's always felt like that. It's always helped me process curiosity, expression, frustration. And I think, well, I don't know, one of the things that keeps me with dance so strongly is that I feel like kinesthetic knowledge and honoring kinesthetic physical knowing is so important. Like I joke with my friends, like I don't think in words so much, like I don't think in full sentences. I think in movement and physicality. So dance has always been the space where I go when I'm feeling a lot of grief or anger or joy or confusion. So that's kind of, I mean, I've had amazing mentors in my life too. And one of my longtime mentors, Ananya Chatterjee, really pushed me to engage with dance and activism and social justice. And I think that a lot of those lessons stayed with me. But then also like a lot of these mentors in this Zoom box, like Leah and Sharon, have been in my life for a while too. And I'm just like, there's so many, I think dance brings me into honoring a lot of people. So I feel very connected. So speaking of which, I will send the question to Leah.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Leila. Thank you, Akram. This is great. I love being in this portal with all of you. My name is Leyya Monatawi. I'm coming to you from Oakland, California today. And dance, I'm one of those people who started making dances like at the age of 3 or something. Like I just always made dances and just kind of never stopped. So, did formal schooling in like the Western, canon of dance at the University of Michigan, and then came out to the Bay to study more dance and to make dances, and did that. And then I would just say that my portal to dance right now it has just been really broadened. Like I consider a lot of practices, including the sound art practice that you didn't quite hear, but you could probably sense, is a really big part of my practice now, as is digital forms and written forms and all these other things that we do. But I think of all of it as sort of a like filtered through the body. And so in a way, like all the practices are dance practices, even if they don't actually come out as like traditional choreographies as much as they used to. But yeah, I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it to Meryl.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Leila Awadallah. I'm coming to you from Oakland, California today. And yeah, dance Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. This question's interesting because I think the qualities that drew me into dance and performance initially are emphasized in my work today. Intimacy, interactivity, embodied memory, movement as medicine, creative collaboration, world building, diversity, and the connection between performance and expression and human rights and activism. I think I had a lot of diverse entry points into dance and performance as a child. But even as far back as like middle school, I can remember like starting to connect my interest in human rights and what was happening in the world with my own creative expression. Like, I think I was in 5th grade and like made this solo performance where I had found like oral interviews of refugees from Bosnia, and the Bosnian War was happening at the time, and took excerpts of like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and like made up a song and made up a dance. And all my teachers were like, what is she doing? They were so like stunned that I was interested in this and that I had like manifested this like crazy performance. And I think that in a lot of ways, like that was my way of processing all of this like juxtapositions and like different information, ways of kind of seeing and perceiving the world. And as I got older, I started to do that in collaboration with other people and in community. And so inevitably that started to bring diverse people and diverse communities together, which I think became kind of a touchstone for the way I work. And inevitably, that is an interactive, intimate movement as medicine. Like these things manifest when you start to bring more people into the conversation. So I think that's the seeds of where like my own artistic process and growth really started to develop, was through this kind of processing these things through the body, through the voice, and through performative expression. And I'll pass it to Sharon.
Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. I'm Sharon Mansur, and movement dance, it feels just how I breathe, how I am in the world. And I was certainly a fairly hyperactive child, so I'm told. And aside from sort of running amok through neighborhood fields, streets, my parents threw me into a creative movement class when I was 7, and I got to pretend to be animals and stars and all sorts of fantastical creatures. And it just really felt like I was home, like it was my way of being, and I was comfortable in my skin. And like similar to Leila, what's a quote? A friend of mine kind of, I don't know if I actually said it this way, language isn't my first language. Sort of, I supposedly said that. And just that sense of moving as being and moving as understanding and moving as asking questions in the world. As well as I was really fortunate, my parents really supported my brother and myself in exploring visual art and music, and loved opera. We just had a very creative household, which I really appreciated. And I just sort of found that thread through how I also approached other studies. And so working kind of in a cross-disciplinary way was just very natural for me. And also collaborating was very natural. Maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade, I started co-writing stories with a very good friend of mine. I found it as a way to communicate and develop really the connections and friendships with people was through creating together. Did some of that with my brother also. And so finding my way towards studying modern dance in high school and college was another coming home, and just felt so free. And a particular mentor I had after college, well, Martha Myers in undergrad was very transformational for me. She introduced the sense of the somatics, mind, body, spirit integration work that really underpins my work today. And then Carla Pirlo was a beautiful mentor for me, based in Washington, D.C., where yeah, her motto is, if you can move, you can dance, basically, and bringing work from home based in Northeast DC, which is an area that when I first started working there, people were afraid to come to our studio theater to take class and perform. And really integrating that sort of daily life, who's in our neighborhood, who are we living alongside, who are we making art with, who are we sharing with, what kind of stories, who has access, all of that really, again, became a strong thread for how I live and work today. And yeah, I'm just really fortunate that it all has felt very organic, and yeah, I feel like I'm aligned with what I need to be doing. And I'm so fortunate with the beautiful global family within the contemporary dance community. And I feel like it's an important vehicle right now in terms of the many stories that are, and the vulnerability of the body right now. I'm feeling so much potency and potential. And I'm so grateful for the artists who are doing this work, including those here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you all for your eloquence. So I see two themes that develop from all your answers, actually. One is about movement as a language of its own that somehow you all are more comfortable with than, you know, the alphabet-based language. And two, this idea of community that keeps coming up that you all alluded to in one form or another. So I'm going to kind of follow up and ask two related questions in many ways. One is, what is it about movement, and I'm using this term very loosely, you can take it any way you want, that allows you to express things that you do not find is possible within other mediums? Now, I'm not saying that other people can do it in other mediums, but for you personally, what is it about this movement that creates an expression? What is it that allows you to use that kind of breaks the boundaries that you spoke about? And two, why is community so central to your work? I mean, beyond, of course, having people to work with and just having camaraderie and everything, you all talk about really thinking about community in a much larger sense, it seems to me, almost transnational. And I'm kind of curious why that is so important, because all of your, you know, bios, what you just said, show a clear notion of living across boundaries in so many different ways. And I'm kind of curious that transgression, why it's important, and, you know, when it becomes, what difficulties it presents for you to try to live beyond the boundaries, and most of us tend to live with it. I will start somebody, so, you know, I'm not going to pick on Leila again, so I'm going to actually start with Leah this time, and then she will do the popcorn, which she sends it to somebody else.
Yeah, I'll just go first on those very difficult questions. All right, I'm gonna hit it. So what is it about movement is probably the most difficult question to articulate, because, you know, I'm gonna try to use words. But for me, movement, the resonance of the body and what you communicate through like an energetic trade-off with your immediate room, whoever's in it, or just with the space itself, if you're alone in the room, like that energetic trade-off, like it has so many more layers than how we you know, contain ideas with words, right? So I use movement as a way of like signaling multiple things at once, in ways that words do too, but in a way that like I can do like some kind of power gesture, but that power gesture can be read by multiple people in multiple different ways depending on what they come into space with. And for me, it actually represents this, and this. For instance, you know, like cultural symbolism, or like a gender statement, or just an aesthetic statement. And it can be all those things at once. It could be, and about 7,000 other things too, simultaneously. So that's what I think movement is so exciting. And then movement coupled with other people moving and the relationship between bodies, it just it just amplifies and what exponentially expands. So like me moving alone will carry one thing, and then as we know as choreographers, as soon as you put another body in that frame, in that space, in that shared space, including the audience, then you have all these other conversations going on and no one has said anything yet. And so, which is not to say dance can't involve words, it's just to say that, like, what is it about movement? But I think that hooks to the community question, because we learn dance in community. Until, like, 18 months ago, we used to learn and train in dance in community, and vernacular dance, like folk dances and family dances and celebrations and mourning rituals and all those things are done in community. And so we learn that the body is in conversation when you have other bodies around. And so I think that's why you hear the word community talked about a lot in dance. I also think because we understand the world through our bodies, we probably all of us agree that we feel the need to move around into new spaces in order to get new information. We actually have to place our bodies in new cities and in new communities in order to learn something about our own bodies and also about the world. That can't be done, well, maybe is best done that way for us as dancers, choreographers, versus like reading about a place or watching a film about a place. I mean, it's just like how we absorb the world. I'm being presumptuous about everybody, but that's how I absorb the world too. So, and we've said it, I think all of us have said it to a certain extent. I could go on about this and on, but I'm going to pass it. I will pass it to Sharon.
Wow. Okay. Well, so yes to all that Leah said. Oh yeah, movement is so juicy, right? Yeah, it's so multidimensional, and also fascinated with the different layers of consciousness that movement conveys. And all the body systems. I mean, there's so much happening within our physical realm that really ties into who we are innately as humans. And so the sense of who we are on a daily basis, amplifying that or honing in on that as movement expression, I mean, that innate part of who we are. I mean, that's what my movement feels so central to me. The many ways that dance can be framed, as a spiritual practice, as a healing practice, as a sense of identity, cultural carrier, environmental geographic reflections, the body and movement as research and as a way to research, that all, it feels like just an endless well to me. And I think one of my first experiences with really being able to connect with people whose verbal language I didn't speak was through an international improvisation dance festival I was part of in Washington, D.C. for many years, curated by Maida Withers, dance professor at George Washington University. And that, I mean, just opening up to, I would meet someone who I couldn't actually verbally talk with. And then 5 minutes later, I'm on stage performing with them and I can connect. I read where and who they were on some level. We could share time and space and energy together. And that is so powerful. And I feel that curiosity in that way of knowing who people are without hearing them verbally talk also has carried me through a lot of my travels. And as maybe a slight aside, I was on a silent meditation and yoga retreat a couple of years ago. And I loved it. I love spending a few days with a group of people I didn't hear anyone talking. And I'd say the biggest letdown was the moment when we all could start verbally talking to each other. I was like, okay, bye, I'm done. And as far as the community, as Leah said, we're naturally in community when we're learning movement. And again, that's something innately we have as humans, how we pattern and observe and learn. And as our sense of being individual and group oriented, our sense of skill acquisition, our sense of learning who we are through the bodies around us. And so that, and I think dance as an ephemeral art form really lends itself, you asked about boundaries, to this sort of porous, shape-shifting, imaginative, reimagining way to think about boundaries, because dance is so mutable. It's always evolving and changing, and it's here and it's gone. You have a chance to reinvent that. I felt that sense of how I think about structures in the world. I don't know, it's allowed a certain flexibility over time. I feel like I learned a lot about opening my worldviews through movement because it had such possibility. And then as I started to learn about dance from other cultures and other points of view, that I was like, well, yeah, that way of being in the world makes a lot of sense to me. So I feel like dance itself structurally and its very nature of being very mobile and transient, I feel like it's a really useful model one could use in macro sense as well as very micro. And how about Meryl?
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's already come up. I think probably the simplest immediate response I had to the question about the body is that we spend so much time in literacy, focused on reading and writing and this like kind of literate education that we get. And there's just something really liberating about our corporal literacy, our body literacy, like what the body knows and can experience, and even what's stored in the body. We have so much memory that's passed down, and our bodies are also our empathy centers. They're what allow us to connect with other people. And so I think that's also where the community thing comes in, that this body knowledge can really become a tool to engaging with other people and other places when language is a barrier, when literacy is a barrier. There is that like innate wisdom that we have, and the longer that you like kind of spend time in it and really get to know it, you're able to work, use it to access and connect, I think, on like different levels with new groups of people. And there's like a healing art in that I know my work explores, and I feel like just from hearing a little bit from some of the other panelists, that's like also something that somatic work that's coming up in community, to be able to work with people to excavate, these embodied memories, to liberate expression, to get, in my work in particular, a lot of connection to sexuality and sexual energy that we can't necessarily do through just speaking, or just reading and writing, that this stuff is a part of this bigger system of knowledge. And I think I would also agree with Sharon that the borders, are they offer this space for shapes shifting and for world building. Dance really has that potential. And so there's also this like future orientation that I think dance allows us to like play in the imagination. It allows us to like envision what can come, and to recreate a society together in community. Like there's this like kind of forward momentum. The liminal space offers possibilities. And I think that there's like this reconstructing, remembering, like to remember the body, that is like part of this choreographic, somatic movement world that we're all kind of living in. Leila, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. Wow. I mean, there's so much that's been said that I would say, but I think on my walk here, I was looking around thinking about how I really struggle sitting still. And then I was like, well, nothing is still. Everything is moving all the time. And then I was reading about Dolphin Migration Patterns in Undrowned, this book by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, which is amazing. And looking at marine mammals as inspiration for like, okay, Black feminist lessons from marine mammals is what it says. And it's like learning about how dolphins listen to each other and move through the ocean together and protect each other and their species. And then I was reading, and then very quickly I was reading about the hunger strikes in Palestine and thinking about the 6 Palestinian prisoners who dug themselves out of prison, and now there's prisoners who are going to start a hunger strike in solidarity with the mistreatment that those Palestinians face. And all of this is at the site of the body and at the site of, they're very different things, dolphins swimming and prisoners escaping, but it's all the body and it's all a collective movement to make change or to shift energy. And so when I think about the importance of movement and dance, I see it everywhere. I see stories and lessons and everything, and that's so cool that it's such an abundant site. There's so much abundance we have when we work with movement. So and from every direction, like even internally, I feel movement connects me to my ancestral memories, like Meryl was speaking of. Like my grandmothers wake up inside me when I'm moving. I feel them, so I can go deep in and like wide beyond interspecies or like across the world when I'm moving. Anything's like so much is possible to be with. So I think maybe for me, like that abundance is pretty incredible when we're searching for engaging in this earth. And the fact that so much is at the side of the body. And that, yeah, of course, leads to community too. Like I don't want to repeat. So I'm thinking about, yeah, just like communities beyond human species, communities beyond time. Like I can be in community with people who were alive 50 years ago too. I can be in community with the future. I can learn ways to be now that will affect and ripple. Like everything's a ripple. So how do your ripples, not be damaging and destructive? Even though I think there's a lot in like rupture and destruction that we have to talk about and understand. I don't like the notion that community is also always sweet and nice and beautiful. I think it's very complex site where we have to grapple with violence too and destruction. So that's part of it.
Thank you so much, all 4 of you. I mean, just real amazing stuff. But this is an excellent segue, actually, to my next question. But before I go on, we're already at 7 o'clock, which I anticipated as a beforehand because there's just so much richness. I understand that some of our attendees may have planned on leaving at 7, and we will be very sorry to see you leave, but we will continue this conversation a little longer because there's a lot of rich material, and my panelists have been very generous with their time, and they were willing to stay a little bit beyond this. So please, if you can, stay with us, and I will try to get your questions. We already have a couple questions here about this, but I'm going to ask one question because it's a great segue, and then I will turn to the audience questions. Either explicitly through your bios, as you self-identify as from the Swana region, as Arab American, as a combination, through your performances, clearly there are some elements. Leila was talking about the grandmother coming through, but the idea of the futuristic folk dance with a debke being turned into almost cyberpunk kind of effect, which is really cool, I think. Sharon with a very clear notion of 1001 Arab futures, a very interesting riff on 1001 Arab Nights, a very Orientalist and limiting text. She's trying to create an opening. And Meryl herself, who just talks a lot about being part of this larger culture. So I'm kind of curious, how does this heritage of, let's call it Arab American for short, I mean, there's a lot more complexity to our identity. And I'm not trying to limit you, by the way, in any way, form, or shape, so please feel free to reject not identified. But how is this kind of being part of this community with all of its warts and brilliance and amazing and frustrating, freeing and cloying elements? What does that mean to you? How does that translate through your work? What kind of, what does it generate for you? And where, to a certain extent, what does it mean in essence to be an Arab American performer, dancer, choreographer, if it means anything? I mean, what is it that it means to you, and what are you trying to do with it in essence? And I will start with Meryl.
Thank you, Akram. That's a good question. I think for me, like the one connection that feels very strong is the way that I tell stories. That feels very related to the sense of time and the sense of rhythm. Feels very related to the storytellers in my family, my ancestors. And I very much like feel a strong connection with the way that I play with time and the way that I play with story, and how my work, even though I don't think I make works that are very like narratively traditional stories, but there's something about the timing and the way that stories are told in my family that feels very connected to my ancestry. And the second part of the question, I think for me, it's been complicated, I think, to identify as an Arab American choreographer. There's not a large Arab American community of dance makers where I live in New Orleans. I've had the pleasure of getting to collaborate with people from the Arab world in many different projects, and there's always felt like a close synergy. I use the metaphor a lot. The way that I tell stories, the way I play with time has always like resonated with people from that part of the world. But I've not that often had the opportunity to work or collaborate with other Arab Americans in dance. And so to some extent, this panel has been a cool experience in just meeting and interacting with a few more folks out there. I think there's different reasons for that. I know, I mean, I've been filling out the form, on like applications for almost 20 years that asks, like, what is your identity, and like only in the last couple of years has like Arab American like entered the check boxes. And I feel like with grants and with a lot of applications and just the conversation in general has taken a while to develop, particularly in certain parts of the country. So a lot of my practice is actually focused on how can I connect with other Arab Americans in my community to share some of these common ideas or themes that we like when we're just talking casually as friends, we can like very much relate to no matter where in the Arab world we're from or our families are from, and bring that in to a dialogue with the community that I live in a way that they can understand and they can relate to and actually like become more interested and engaged in what is happening in other parts of the world or what this culture even is. So for me, that's been, I think, more of my focus than actually really feeling like I have a strong like network of Arab American dance makers that I'm like constantly surrounded by. I will pass this to Leila next.
Well, happy to be newly in community with you, Meryl. When you were speaking, it was reminding me of when Sharon brought me and Leah to Keokso, Minnesota, and the three of us shared work side by side. And in the Cedar Tree Project, which Sharon can definitely talk more about, but it was like, yeah, on the impetus that we were Arab American choreographers, and what does that mean, and how our work looks so different and our contexts are so different, but it's amazing to just like actually, yeah, like really celebrate that rather than be like, oh no, I'm not doing it this way or that way. I think Arab American to me feels like a site of tension it feels like a clashing. And I've always been kind of fascinated with the tension, especially Palestinian American, which feels like the reverberations of settler colonial, um, settler colonial takeover of indigenous land, and like the site of which, when I feel something about Palestine, but then I'm here as an American citizen with an American passport, it's all a contradiction that feels like something I need to continuously pull apart and examine. To even be sitting in this room feels like something to think about to me. So I think there's that. There's the fact that like this country has brought a lot of this politic has brought a lot of damage to Arab American communities around the world and continues to do so. And working in Lebanon, I guess too, being in Lebanon a lot, I really feel like, yeah, I'm a U.S. citizen. I mean, that's something that's like the highest power, or like distortedly and absurdly, this really strange power that I think we all have to reflect on in this country. So, but then on top of that, yeah, just Arab American identity feels like there's so much more that we could cultivate. I I get excited when I meet like, oh, like where, like from where? Where's your ancestors? Like, what's your name? I hear your name. Like, I want to find you. We want to find each other. So there's that too. There's beautiful, a lot of beautiful things, and I love seeing how artists contemplate this. Writers, poets, films, dancers, because that's where I really find who I am. Oh no, Sharon.
Come back.
All right.
I'm just technical.
Okay, I'll pass it to Leyya then.
Cool. Hi. I can. Oh well. Okay. So how Arab Americanness plays out in my work versus like in my sort of dance making is pretty complicated for me to state, because I feel like my work at large it does other things, because as I work as like a producer and a curator, and so it can like, you know, I'm trying to work multiple levels at the same time. But I will say, I'll start here, that I think that the Arab body, both Arab and Arab American body, is constantly under threat, like actual physical threat and narrative threat and misunderstanding. And so there's a way of like claiming our bodies as Arab bodies, and moving them with agency that feels deeply like part of the battle, part of the war, part of the part of the resistance. So so if you just take that and you can extrapolate that onto stage or onto how I represent in grants, or how I represent as a teacher, how I like how I walk down the street, like to claim the Arab body as a source of power, especially, or the Arab female body, woman's body as a place of power, is like a really important thing for me, and I think for all of us, and it comes out in my work, and I confront the idea of like cultural work in terms of like preserving or broadcasting or making more visible Arabness through my work. It's actually, I do feel like I am preserving Arabness in my work, as like, you know, in diaspora. I do feel like I'm broadcasting Arab culture in my work on my own terms, but I do prioritize sort of like a distortion of culture as a way of like taking like sometimes nostalgia, or sometimes ancestral information, or sometimes just form, like movement forms, folk forms, and distorting them into new forms. But in dealing with those materials, you're actually also archiving them in your body. So there's this like creating like a fiction, like a future archive of like where we're hopefully going. I have a hard time thinking about the past. I kind of only think about the future, which serves me well, and sometimes maybe not always well. But yeah, so I feel like something about preserving, broadcasting, distorting in order to dismantle a misnarrative of what Arabness is or Arab Americanness is in this country, but also, um, uh, offer plurality to what that is what I'm trying to do in all of the work that I do.
That's just incredibly beautiful, everything that has been said. And I'm really sorry that Sharon dropped off. I'm kind of concerned. I was hoping that.
She's restarting her computer.
Okay, all right. Well, we will give her time to do that. I have like about 100 other questions, which will take us through maybe 2022 and keep you here. But I really must turn at this point to some questions from our audience. So there is an anonymous attendee. So there's somebody who didn't give his name, but and it's, I think, a more aesthetic, technical, professional question is, how do you express crying, sadness, and revolution in dancing? And Leah, go ahead.
I make noise. You should, that's what I do. I just make noise.
Meryl or Leila, beyond noise?
Sure. I was going to say that I think sometimes, as far as revolution goes, just actually any of them, just a body in space or two bodies in space. There's the potential for it to become a political action. There's the potential for it to become a revolution, a grieving, hysteria. I mean, that's kind of the like amazing part of live performance, is when it's really live, when you're really like out there, without some super like tight structure, and able to like really engage with the people that are in the room with you, that with time and with space, things manifest, they can happen. And so I think all of it is possible, and all of it is possible with just a body in space, being present and standing there. And the rest is aesthetics.
I really appreciate that. In many ways, I mean, it's again what Leah was saying, just the presence of an Arab body sometimes is revolutionary, just to claim space in of itself. So I really appreciate what you both have said, but I'm going to turn it over to Leila to see her input into the matter.
I'll just say that when I feel grief or like that crying sadness or anger, like that is always pushing me to channel the energy towards something. So dance has become the space where I'm like reading something, or like in May when Palestine was in an uprising and there was so much attacks in Gaza, and it was super heavy, and there continues to be heavy things, but like coming into space, creating something, talking with people, like witnessing people, like that little excerpt that was in my clip from Sheikh Jarrah, the Palestinian Women's Theater. Like, we were all upset with what was happening, and we're like, well, we're gonna go on the roof and make a dance film. But it was because that's where the energy had to go. It had to go somewhere. Otherwise, it just like knocks on you all day long. So it's a practice in moving energy in those moments of grief or revolution or anger, that I think, yeah, dance lends
Let me
itself.
amplify the question a little bit, just to push it and push you a little bit on all these elements. I really appreciate what you're saying about self-expression as a way of externalizing a lot of the grief that we experience as Arab Americans. And unfortunately, in the last 20 years, we've experienced way too much, and we have been subjected to all sorts of things in this country, not least of which is to become, alien and branded as the other, so to speak, and terrorist. But I'm kind of curious. I mean, the term revolution also implies a larger context. That is, it's not just a, you know, a personal or even a communal thing, but it's actually a revolution in the sense of transformation beyond us, beyond ourselves, beyond our perhaps small or large communities. So I guess my question here is, where do you find dance? And this is follows up on Meryl's, you know, notion of political activism. Dance is not just a neutral thing. What impact do you find your work has, you know, as one of the questions asking, the trails that you leave in terms of transformation? I mean, revolution as a transformation of the environment around us. Oh, there's Sharon, and we will go back to her. So I'm kind of curious. We'll let her kind of sign in before we immediately pounce on her to ask questions. Welcome back, Sharon. So I was asking about dance as this kind of notion of having, well, to use Leila's notion, a ripple effect, a revolution, transformation. So I'm kind of curious, where do you find your work doing that, and how does it do that? So Sharon, do you want to tackle that, or do you want to just catch your breath after you've restarted the computer? Because there's nothing more fun than having technical difficulties in the midst of just a deep conversation to really kind of bring those juices out. Do you want a couple of minutes? I think I'll just give you a couple. No, you don't. You want to?
No, let's do it.
Okay.
Hi, I'm back. So ripple effect in our practices and how we see that manifesting.
Well, also, I mean, revolution, you know, so Leila was saying, because a question from the audience was about how do you express sadness, grief, and revolution in your dance? And Leila was talking about, and Leyya as well as Meryl, about how, you know, there are all these internal feelings that we feel, and you externalize them through dance, choreography, movement. And I kind of wanted to build on that and asking how that creates perhaps social change, political activism, and revolution in that sense, something that goes beyond the self and the smallerish community. So that's kind of the question I'm asking.
Sure. Yes. Yes. No, I've been thinking about that quite a bit within, you know, my own individual practice, as well as within the Cedar Tree Project platform that I started a few years ago. And also when I made the choice to, instead of living primarily in urban areas and working in rural communities on more of a project basis, to flip that to live full-time in a more rural community, and at times look at rural urban conversations and dialogues. Yeah, I feel that very strongly, that the work, one individual, the power in one individual, and what they're finding in their rootedness and, you know, their belief system, and in that constellation relation to community. I mean, I've witnessed it in my own growth as an artist here in Winona, and again through wonderful mentors. Like, there's a power in that clarity that I find can definitely resonate, and even in the power of being still, even in that sort of sense of like, I'm here, I'm witnessing, I'm paying attention, I'm archiving, I'm noticing, I'm recognizing others. That, especially the ways we can be more quickly connected to others, but also in that slow, kind of those slow, deeper ways we can find connections with others. That I've learned, you know, since I've moved into my more full-time rural home here. And the Cedar Tree Project for me has ideally those portals and invitations to have a very local centering, and as well as many circles and as wide as it can be. And whether that's a conversation, or again a witnessing, or a disagreement, all of that resonates. And as we talked about, how that the body is such a vehicle for all those ripples, and that's how I'm feeling and experiencing connections and ripples in my work. And the Cedar Tree Project for me is ideally a very porous container that I offer, and I hope it can kind of keep growing and changing as people want to engage with it. Yeah, I think that's the power of the individual, who also includes really the universe in themselves, is how I'm thinking about that.
Thanks, Sharon. You want to give it to somebody else now?
Sure. Leah, take it away.
I'm thinking about like revolution or revolutionary acts, or like how we are actually like part of a daily or generational or century long or multiple century long battle. I think about all of our works, but I'll just talk on behalf of mine because I'm sure we all have different ideas. But I do think of art as being a beacon of sorts. So when you put like some strange thoughts out there, or strange, or whatever, not strange thoughts, if you just put your work out there and it looks a certain way and it holds a certain content and it's in a certain context and it's through a certain body and it's presented through a certain lens, it like becomes a beacon for anyone who's like going to make that legible to themselves. And then that if your work is legible or curious enough, then the right people will come to you. And so the work itself counters this idea of like isolation, or like I'm alone in these battles. So like it's a way of tethering or finding your people internationally. So like I know who my people are in all these different countries, all these different places, all these different states, and it's like, oh, we came together through dance, or we came together through this writing element, or we came together through sound, or we came together through this, that, and the other thing. But it helps you understand like how we can all link arms, and that becomes sort of the building of the revolution. Okay, I'll pass that on to Meryl.
Sure. I mean, I'm a big proponent of the idea that a revolution is it starts from the personal is political. A tube of cherry red lipstick can become a liberation tool, or it can become a weapon. The attention is in the details. And I think when people are reminded that they have a body, that they have agency and autonomy over, they have a voice that can be heard, that they can witness and be witnessed, that they have a sexuality that has a right to be expressed and serviced and pleasured. These are liberation tools, these are weapons, these are revolutions, and that trickles outward. And I see that a lot in the communities that I work with, and even in collaborative artistic processes. And I think it starts in those little details. It starts small, it starts at home. Leila.
Yes to everything. I feel like I don't need to add. That was great. That was beautiful.
All right. Well, listen, we're almost at 7:30. And I am just like, I swear I could just like go on and keep asking you questions, but we do have to stop, unfortunately. And before we stop, I want to thank you all for taking the time from your very busy and creative schedule to be with us tonight, to share with us your own experiences as individuals and as a collective and a community of Arab American dancers, choreographers, performers, and to thank you for sharing your work with us, both here. And I surely hope that when we come out of this COVID era, I don't know when the hell that is going to be, but hopefully soon, that maybe we'll have an opportunity to bring you over to North Carolina State University for live performances. I think that would be just so ever cool to have an Arab American dance festival here and to have you all come here. So that is my pledge, is to attempt to do that. As my colleague Elizabeth Saylor said on the chat, inshallah, on Arib. So thank you so much again. I'm going to now share my screen because I have to, of course, do the final touches here. So I apologize for this, if I may share my screen. All right. So once again, the shameless asking for donations. Our work, and I love the fact that all of you talked about archiving because we find that to be absolutely vital. One of the key elements we have at the Khairallah Center is we want to share with the public that Arabs have been, and Arabic speakers, by the way, have been part of this country since the, Arabic speakers since the 1600 with early West African slaves, but certainly folks from what we call the Arab world today have been coming here since the 1850s and 1860s. We're not newcomers. We're part and parcel of this country in all of its glory and in all of its problems, as Leila very eloquently put in terms of the tensions that we have as Arabs and as Americans. So it is, it is our privilege at the Khairallah Center to build an archive, both conversations like this and all sorts of other things that help us, in essence, tell a story or stories, really in the plural, that is very divergent from the narrative that has developed about who Arabs are in America. So please help us if you can. We really appreciate it. But more importantly, we hope that you will join us for our next webinar. And our next webinar is on October 7th. And it's going to be with Arab American theater and playwrights and actors. And it's going to be a wonderful conversation that we have. So please, again, go to Turath2020.org, and my colleague Dania will put that link there. And you can click on events and you will be able to do that. And we have one final webinar this fall semester with Mike Musallam, who's done some, as a filmmaker based in LA, who's done some amazing work in terms of Arab American film. And we'll be having conversation with him in November, and that'll be up hopefully soon. Thank you again. We wish you all a safe and healthy, and be well, be happy, be joyful. And thank you for spending this evening with us. And thank you to our panelists. So please join me in thanking them all. You all have a wonderful evening and have a good night. And we will see you again soon, hopefully. تصبحوا على خير ومع السلامة.